Welcome, good morning. Bienvenidos a Lend. So I wanted to start off with a story because we're all about books and stories. And that story is that about 15 years ago, I went to Thailand. And I wanted to go trekking. I was feeling very adventuresome. I had never been to Asia before. And in that time, I really looked back at the yin-yang of this trip. So many beautiful sights and sounds and smells. But at the same time, obviously, I got sick, which is never fun, especially when you're overseas. I see nodding, so people have been there with me. And what I really came away with was this newfound appreciation for Buddhism. And every time I would see her, she would hand me these bags of books, like Macy's bags filled with books. And she was a librarian in her own right, because she would write inside every book, excellent read, just so-so, take out the tissues. And then she would go a step further, and she would say, these 2 books are for your cousin Beth, these 3 are for your mom, and she would recommend books specifically for people in our family. So we're going to learn a lot about mavens today and what mavens are and how to create mavens out of our children. And so the first book that I really learned to read was Green Eggs and Ham. My mom had read this book to me so many times that I memorized it. And I was sitting on the couch. I remember where I was sitting on the couch. I don't remember how old I was, which is maybe 5, 6. And I was sitting on the couch, and I was saying what I had memorized. And my mom was a teacher. She was an art teacher for 35 years, but she was a teacher. So she had shown me to kind of move my finger, but like I was just moving my finger at that point. And then one day, I remember sitting there and pointing and going, whoa, what I'm saying is what I'm seeing. And I had that one-to-one correspondence light bulb go off. How many of you have seen a child with that moment where they learn to read, your own children or students that you have? And I yelled out, Mom, I'm reading, I'm reading. And I continue to have Dr. Seuss in my heart, and all 4 of my books are in rhyme. And I would like you to show me just like a C for connection, if you're connecting with this book. If you read this book as a child and this influenced your life, just show me a little C for connection. But I love Choose Your Own Adventure books. And again, connection, if you were someone who read Choose Your Own Adventure, love Choose Your Own Adventure. I love them because they gave me creative control of the story. You know, Choose Your Own Adventure says, if you want this to happen, go to page 46. And then you start reading page 46 and you don't like it, so you go back. And you say, if you want this to happen, go to page 57. So you go back to 57. Wouldn't it be nice if life were like that? Like we could go beep, 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 beep. I didn't like that decision. Let me back up and redo, right? So we're going to look at 2 essential questions today. First of all, what are those books for your students? At any age level, this can go K-12 into university. What are the books for your particular students? And I'm going to give you a chance today to turn and talk about your students. That's going to make them into a reader for pleasure. Because all of the research says that is what will guarantee their success in school, right? If they're reading for pleasure. Again, connection, just that C for connection. If you've read The Tipping Point, you know The Tipping Point. The Tipping Point is a very pivotal text about society and kind of how we function. It's by Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote Blink and a couple other kind of observations of society. He has wonderful research in here. I'm taking out one nugget. And that nugget is this idea of people who are connectors, who are mavens, and who are salespeople. We are living in a viral society where children today are texting and tweeting and Snapchatting more than anything. And all we're going to try to do is insert books into the conversation more. The number of minutes that a parent spends in really meaningful conversation is 3.5. My friend had a conversation with her child the other day who's going off to middle school about not letting people take your power away. That's a meaningful conversation. But the number of minutes that a child is watching TV is 1,620. This is a more recent study, and CNN said that on any given day, teens in the United States spend about 9 hours using social media for their enjoyment. Let me put that 9 hours in context. That is more time than a teenager spends sleeping. That is more time than a teenager spends with their parent or their teacher. And that is just the social media for enjoyment. That doesn't count for homework. That doesn't count research at school in the library. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, as an adult, some books that changed my life. And again, please, if you connect with this book, please show me that C for connection. I'd really appreciate that. The first book is The Book Thief. So if you read this book, please, if you saw the movie, you can still do this, but it doesn't count really, let's be clear. The movie wasn't as good as the book. And the reason the movie wasn't as good as the book, and the reason the children have to be reading this book, is because the point of view that Marcus chose to use was narrating from death. He is talking, the backdrop is World War II. I've read a lot of books with Nazi Germany as the backdrop, but Death is narrating this story and starts the book by telling you that he's coming to get the soul of the person and what the colors and the aura look like when he comes to get the soul. I mean, brilliant. So to me, on point of view alone, the writing is gorgeous, but point of view alone, this book has had a huge influence on me. This is about a young girl in Nazi Germany who's very poor, And her mother does the laundry and the ironing for the wealthier families. So she delivers that to the wealthier families. And when she does that, she sees this room with all these books in there. Now, Liesel is not a reader. She doesn't know how to read. So she starts stealing books, like they're gold, from this woman. And very unexpectedly, this woman sort of takes her under her wing. Now, some things seem like they're really bad in the moment, but they actually bring him to the next place that he's supposed to be. And you never know if it's a blessing in disguise. And that's the way life kind of works. You never know that something bad might actually take you to where you were meant to be. So this kind of created this mantra or this motto in my life. When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you achieve it. And this last book, and I think you'll be a little surprised, is Harold and the Purple Crayon. People can connect. I heard the reaction, so you can connect with that. I read this book as a child, but I have it on my desk as a writer still to this day. Because to me, Harold is like the quintessential manifest destiny. This is the person saying that if life goes wrong, you can draw yourself a sidewalk to get out. You can draw yourself a window. You can draw yourself a ladder to the moon. And it's not unlike Choose Your Own Adventure books, but to me, Harold, I keep it there on my desk because believe it or not, 4 published books, and I get tons of rejections. I got rejections this week. You gotta have a thick skin when you're an author. And in getting those rejections, I gotta think, all right, who else can I send this to? Where else can I move this, right? And I listen in and I think to myself, do I let this person share this? And I think, sure. And sure enough, she was talking about 50 Shades of Grey, and that had been an influential book in her life. And just like, it's, I want, in all seriousness, just in the same way that J.K. Rowling had an influence on boy readers. E.L. James, Erica, I worked with Erica as well, wonderful, humble woman. Fame has not gone to her head yet. But 50 Shades of Grey changed the course of literature for women. To me, Jeanette's opening line is the best opening line I've ever seen in any book. Makes you want to read the book. I was sitting in a taxi, wondering if I've overdressed for the evening, when I saw Mom rooting through a dumpster. So she goes on to talk about how she's wearing pearls, she's in New York, going to a fancy event, and her mother is homeless looking through a dumpster. Don't you want to know what's going on in the story and why that's the case? So picture a swimming pool, right? A long swimming pool. And I'd like you just to raise your hand if you're just beginning in doing student-led book talks, or you've never done them before. It's okay. We're all educators here, we're all reflective. Good, this is good. The honest people, good. A couple people in the beginning, you've done a few maybe. How about how many of you are swimming? Like you've done some, but you'd like to do more, you'd like to do different kinds. Great. And then how many of you are diving in, like you could write your master's thesis in this? Like you've been doing student-led book talks for forever. Okay, but what I wanted to just see as you looked around the room, there's such a wealth of knowledge in this room. So I'm really gonna put on my educator hat here and not my author hat right now. And I'm gonna talk about differentiation. This is one of the areas that I go out and speak just about differentiation. So the pillar to me of differentiation is knowledge of students. And under knowledge of students, under that umbrella of knowledge of students, we're gonna be differentiating reading recommendations that we make and that we ask our students to make in 4 different areas. The first one is their interests, right? Does your child like castles or cooking, ponies or princesses, snakes or salamanders? Do they play soccer? Do they play basketball? What do they do outside of school? What are their interests? Or at school, what are their interests? So that's the obvious one about, here, hand you a book about snakes because you love snakes, right? Those are obvious. And then their ability, their reading level, their English language level. How many of you check in with the teachers at your school to see what their reading level is? Now, a lot of you have the advantage that you have students for many years, so you know when they come in that they're not at a certain level or they are at a certain level, but also finding out what their ELD level is. What's their English language level also? Home circumstances is a little more invisible sometimes. You may know there's a divorce going on. You may know there's alcoholism, or they don't get along with their sibling in the home. But those are things that you want to, and the other reason it's important for peer-to-peer conversations is because a lot of times their friends will know what's going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about books that friends can recommend, because a friend might know that their mom's actually, an alcoholic, whatever it is. There's some situation going on at home that a friend might know and that the teacher or librarian might not know. And the final one is learning modality. So I'm sure as educators, you're familiar with visual, kinesthetic. You all got this in your credentialing program. But I want to make the point that when you differentiate on learning modality, you are not just differentiating in how they take in information, but also in how they output information, right? So I'll give you an example. I did a solar system unit with my students. So one particular group was a lot of ELD students who weren't particularly comfortable being verbal in front of, presenting in front of. So they decided they were going to make t-shirts about their book. I bought some cheap t-shirts at Michael's, And they wrote all their facts about their book on their t-shirts, and then they turned around and someone read out loud what their t-shirts had on them. Another group that was more verbal did a newscast. So they talked about their book in a newscast. And another one did a diorama because they were more artistic. So giving children information and also letting them show you what they've learned in different ways is super important. We want him spending 80% of his time reading those just right books, those books at his level. Why? Because there he can have stamina, comprehension, and fluency. If he's reading other, dessert or appetizer books, he's not going to have that. But I still want to give him the chance to look at picture books because he loves picture books and he feels successful reading picture books, right? And then also, he wants to dip into that Harry Potter series. You know when those kids turn the page and kind of look like they're reading, but they're not really reading? He wants to do that with his brother's books, and that's fine, because that's kind of his North Star. That's where he's going. But I'm going to give you the most important nugget, I think, of Mosaic of Thought. This kind of changed my teaching, right? Mosaic of Thought is all about connections, text to text, text to self, text to world, and text to media connections. So you won't know this with your students, but you give them a book like this, and they get to actually see somebody who's going through what they're going through. This plot is very familiar. Think about Luke. Think about James. Very, orphaned, mean aunts, mean aunt and uncle, whatever, and then they go into this other world, and they're famous. So that kind of text-to-text connection is what we want students making. We want to show them how to make those text-to-text connections. Vamos a escuchar una charla en español de quinto grado. Date cuenta que, como dije, algunas de las niñas, su primer idioma no es español. Entonces están preguntando preguntas en español y están un poquito penosas porque les da un poquito, son tímidos en hablar en español. So you want to make sure you're modeling that kind of language, cliffhanger. You're modeling that language for your children. So he's doing that because his teacher, whom I know well, did that a lot for them. So my book, ABC Schools for Me, came out last June. And in the world of social media, we still do utilize that, right? So I did a contest nationally, sort of book talking my book nationally to schools. So this is what we're up against. This is what we're trying to kind of put books into the conversation more, make it cool to tweet about a book, make it cool to Snapchat the photo, the cover of a book, take a selfie, right? Si Somos Latinos, Karen Earhart did this, Jazzman, books that are going to speak to their experience and have people in them that look like them so they can connect with those characters. I want to also put a plug in about writing and reading connection. A lot of our students are not going to necessarily be able to verbally stand up there and do a book talk, but please let them write paragraphs or other things. So I'm going to show you, this is this flip book, right? So, and I know a lot of you are high school, but you can still do this. They love this stuff. I'm seeing nods. So this is just, story elements, character, setting, plot, and solution, right? So you can have that. They can draw if they can't write yet, or they can write paragraphs if they're in older grades. You're welcome to look at these if you want later. And then you can have sequencing. What happened first? What happened second? These, to me, are one of the best things. Kids love these. And it's literally folded hot dog, cut it a couple times, hand it over, show them the activity. They can dress up as the character. You could, if you have steps in your school or lockers in your school, they can do the spine of the book, right? There's all different ways to book talk, to be a maven of a book. To me, what we're looking at these days is they don't even know what this is sometimes. What's an encyclopedia? I don't know what that is. Because now there's Google. Nobody, I pulled out, and we had a whole set at my house. We had the encyclopedias. How many people had those encyclopedias with the different letters on them at their house? So that's my website. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm going to be signing books from 9:45 to 10:30 outside right in front of the library. And I believe they're on sale 50% off, so they're a really good deal. So yeah, I'll be around if you have any questions. Thank you all so much. You were a great audience.